If a stranger handed you a crumpled letter, whispering, "It's from your daughter," would you dare to read it? The night was a blur of crystal chandeliers, the clinking of champagne glasses, and hollow congratulations. Richard Alcott moved through the gala like a ghost, his tailored navy tuxedo fitting like a second skin, his smile effortless yet empty. For a man who had everything, the towering skyline, the billion-dollar empire, the whispered awe of his peers, he felt nothing. It was always the same. Success, applause, loneliness. As the clock neared midnight, Richard slipped away, unnoticed. The city outside was slick with rain, the asphalt glistening under the jaundiced glow of street lamps. He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked, no destination in mind, the drizzle dampening his hair. He had just passed the edge of Bryant Park when he saw her. A small figure hunched against the cold, sitting cross-legged on the wet pavement. Blonde hair matted to her forehead, torn jeans, bare feet, a child. For one brief moment their eyes locked, and Richard froze. Bright blue eyes, too large for her thin face, stared up at him with a strange mixture of terror and desperate hope. Then, without a word, she stood and approached him. He instinctively took a step back, unsure if she would beg, plead, or simply vanish like so many other lost souls in this city. Instead, she thrust a crumpled envelope into his hand. The paper was damp, fragile between his fingers. "It's from my mother," the girl whispered, voice shaking. "Before she died." Before Richard could respond, she turned and ran, bare feet slapping against the wet concrete, disappearing into the misty labyrinth of the city. He stood there, heart pounding, staring at the battered envelope. He should have thrown it away. He should have walked on. Instead, he found himself peeling it open with trembling hands. The letter inside was scrawled in shaky handwriting, ink smudged by time and tears. "Richard, if you're reading this, it means I am gone. I kept our secret because I had to. Because I loved her too much to let her grow up in a world where she would only be a pawn. She deserved better than boardrooms and broken promises. Her name is Emily. She's 10 now. She's everything good that I ever had. Please, if you have even a shred of the man I loved still inside you, find her. Protect her. She's yours. She's always been yours. Forgive me. Claire." The world tilted beneath Richard's feet. Claire. A name he hadn't dared think in years. The only woman he had ever truly loved. And Emily, a daughter he never knew existed. Rain blurred his vision, or maybe it was something else, something burning hot and unbidden. He clutched the letter to his chest, as if he could absorb the truth of it through his skin. Then he turned and ran. The city swallowed him whole as he searched, calling her name into the rain. "Emily!" But the streets offered no answers, only silence and shadows. An hour later, soaked to the bone and shaking, Richard stumbled into a coffee shop, a hole-in-the-wall joint with flickering neon lights and cracked leather booths. He ordered a coffee he didn't want, hands trembling as he unfolded the letter again. 10 years old, a decade lost. How could Claire have kept this from him? And yet, he understood. His world back then had been vicious, ruthless. A place where a child could be weaponized, leveraged, destroyed. She had protected Emily the only way she knew how, and now Claire was gone, and Emily was alone. The door chimed behind him, and he looked up instinctively. It wasn't her, of course it wasn't. He cursed under his breath and rose, leaving the coffee untouched, plunging back into the rain. He spent the night searching, parks, shelters, alleys. His fortune could buy skyscrapers, politicians, even kings, but it couldn't conjure a missing child from the underbelly of a city that devoured the lost. By dawn, he was broken, sitting on the steps of the public library, head in his hands, soaked and shivering, until he heard it, a soft cough. He looked up, and there she was, Emily, sitting on the opposite steps, knees tucked to her chest, watching him with those same brilliant blue eyes. Slowly, carefully, Richard stood. He approached her like one might approach a wounded animal. No sudden moves, no raised voice. "Emily?" he said, voice raw. She flinched but didn't run. He sank to his knees in front of her, ignoring the cold seeping into his bones. "My name is Richard," he said softly. "I knew your mother, a long time ago." She studied him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Are you rich?" she asked, voice wary. He almost laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "Yes," he said, "but that's not why I'm here." He pulled the letter from his pocket and held it out to her. "I'm here because she asked me to find you." Emily stared at the letter, then at him. Tears welled in her eyes, and she scrubbed at them fiercely with the back of her hand. "I don't need you," she said, voice trembling. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can," Richard said. "You're brave, just like her." She blinked at that. "But you don't have to do it alone anymore," he said. For a long, terrible moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she unfolded herself from her huddle and stood. "Where would we go?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Richard swallowed past the lump in his throat. "Anywhere you want," he promised. And for the first time in years, hope flickered to life inside him. Not just for her, but for himself. Because sometimes miracles didn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes they came in the form of a crumpled letter and a girl brave enough to deliver it. The rain had softened to a mist by the time Richard flagged down a black town car. He opened the door, shielding Emily with his coat as best he could, and ushered her into the back seat. The driver's eyes flickered in the rearview mirror, taking in the dripping billionaire and the ragged, shivering child. But he asked no questions. Years of catering to New York's elite had taught him the value of silence. Richard settled into the seat beside Emily, the leather creaking beneath their weight. He gave the driver an address, not his penthouse, but a small apartment he kept on the Lower East Side, somewhere private, somewhere safe. The engine hummed to life, and the car slid into the wet streets. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Emily sat rigidly, arms crossed over her chest, eyes fixed on the window. The city lights smeared into blurs against the rain-slick glass. Richard watched her from the corner of his eye, noticing everything. The way she flinched when the driver hit a pothole, the way her fingers trembled, curling into the frayed sleeves of her jacket, the way she glanced at him, quick, sharp looks, before yanking her gaze back to the window. She didn't trust him. Of course she didn't. He was a stranger with a name her mother once whispered in her dreams. Richard cleared his throat, his voice rough in the confined space. "Are you hungry?" Emily shrugged. "We can get something," he said. "Anything you want?" Another shrug. Richard exhaled slowly. "Do you like grilled cheese?" This time, a flicker of something, interest maybe, crossed her face. "There's a diner near the apartment," he offered. "Best grilled cheese in the city." Emily turned slightly, studying him with wary blue eyes. "You say that like you've eaten there," she said, her voice small but edged with skepticism. Richard smiled, the first real smile in what felt like years. "I have," he said. "A lot." Emily hesitated, then gave the smallest of nods. It wasn't trust, but it was something. The diner was nearly empty when they arrived, a greasy, wonderful relic of old New York, all chrome and cracked vinyl booths. Richard guided Emily to a corner booth, away from the windows, and slid into the seat opposite her. A tired-looking waitress approached, blinking at the unlikely pair but saying nothing. They ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup for Emily, black coffee for Richard, and sat in silence until the food arrived. Emily attacked the sandwich like a starving wolf, her small hands trembling as she devoured it. Richard forced himself to look away, giving her the dignity of not staring. When she slowed, licking crumbs from her fingers, he ventured cautiously, "How long have you been alone?" Emily shrugged, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "Since Mama got sick." Richard's chest tightened. "I'm sorry," he said. Emily looked at him, eyes hard. "You didn't even know," she said. The words hit him like a slap. "No," he said quietly. "I didn't." She studied him, searching for the lie, finding none. "Mama said you would have loved me," she whispered. Richard swallowed hard. She was right, he said. For a moment, they just sat there, the diner's hum fading into the background. A man and a girl bound by blood and grief, strangers fumbling toward something fragile and precious. "Where's your house?" Emily asked after a while. Richard hesitated. "I have a place," he said, "but it's big. Empty. Maybe not the best place to start." Emily frowned. "Big sounds good." Richard smiled sadly. "Big can be lonely, too." She tilted her head, considering that. "Are you lonely?" she asked. Richard didn't flinch from the question. "I was," he said. "Until tonight." Something shifted in Emily's face. A softening, a crack in the armor. The waitress returned with the check. Richard paid without looking, leaving a generous tip. As they slid back into the town car, Emily yawned, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. She leaned her head against the window, eyes fluttering shut. Richard watched her for a moment, then shrugged out of his jacket and draped it gently over her small frame. She stirred but didn't wake, burrowing into the warmth. And in that moment, Richard Alcott, the billionaire, the titan, the man who had everything and nothing, felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. A fragile, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, he hadn't lost everything after all. The apartment was modest by his standards, a two-bedroom loft with exposed brick walls and battered hardwood floors. Cozy, unpretentious. He carried Emily inside, her head lolling against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. He laid her gently on the couch, tucking a throw blanket around her. For a long time, he just stood there, watching her sleep. His daughter. His. The word felt foreign and sacred on his tongue. He sat down in an armchair across the room, too wired to sleep, too terrified to look away. The city hummed outside, neon reflections dancing on the floor. And Richard Alcott kept watch over the girl he never knew he had, the girl he would do anything to protect. Because this time, he wouldn't fail her. This time, he would be the man Claire believed he could be. This time, he would be a father, no matter what it cost him. Morning came reluctantly. Richard stirred in the battered armchair, his body stiff and aching from sleeping upright. Through the gauzy curtains, sunlight struggled to pierce the gloom of the Lower East Side. For a moment, he forgot. Forgot the letter. Forgot the rain. Forgot the girl sleeping a few feet away. Then Emily stirred, a soft whimper escaping her lips, and reality crashed back over him. He rose slowly, joints protesting, and crossed the room. She lay curled into a tight ball under the throw blanket, her face half buried in the worn fabric. She looked impossibly small. fragile. His heart ached. He knelt beside her. "Emily," he said softly. Her eyes snapped open, wild, terrified, and she scrambled back against the couch, heart hammering. "Hey, hey," Richard said quickly, hands raised. "It's just me. You're safe." Emily's breathing slowed, but her body remained tense, coiled like a spring ready to snap. Richard sat back on his heels, giving her space. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to scare you." She said nothing, just stared at him, wary and silent. He rose slowly, moving to the small kitchen tucked into the corner. "How about breakfast?" he offered over his shoulder. "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage cereal." A beat of silence. Then, so softly he almost missed it. "Okay." It was a start. They ate in silence. Emily perched on a bar stool, Richard leaning against the counter. She picked at a bowl of frosted flakes, while he nursed a cup of bitter coffee. "After breakfast," Richard said carefully, "I thought we could get you some new clothes, maybe a haircut." Emily's spoon clattered against the bowl. "No," she said sharply. Richard blinked. "No?" She pushed the bowl away, her face flushing with anger. "You're trying to change me." "No," Richard said, taken aback. I thought you'd be more comfortable." Emily crossed her arms, glaring at him. "Mama said people only want to fix you when they don't really love you." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Richard set his coffee down carefully. "I'm not trying to fix you," he said. "I just want you to be safe, warm." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. "I was fine before you," she whispered. Richard swallowed hard. "I know," he said. "I know you're strong. You had to be." He took a slow breath. "But you don't have to do everything alone anymore." Emily said nothing, but she didn't leave the table, and Richard counted that as a victory. They spent the day navigating a delicate truce. At the clothing store, Emily refused anything pink, frilly, or obviously new. She gravitated toward simple jeans, hoodies, sneakers, clothes that would let her blend into the background. Richard let her choose everything. At the hair salon, she flinched every time the stylist reached for her, until Richard knelt beside her and held her hand through the entire trim. At lunch, she picked at a burger, eyes darting constantly around the small cafe, muscles tensed for flight. By evening, they returned to the loft, both exhausted. Emily disappeared into the second bedroom without a word. Richard sat alone in the living room, staring out at the city, wondering if he was in over his head. She didn't trust him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And he didn't blame her. He had missed a decade of her life. He had been a ghost when she needed a father. How did you bridge that kind of chasm? He didn't know. All he knew was that he had to try. That night, Richard dreamed. He dreamed of Claire. She stood on a beach, hair whipping around her face, laughing as she held a small child's hand. "Emily." "She needs you," Claire called over the roar of the wind and waves. "But she doesn't know it yet." Richard reached for them, but they faded into mist. He woke gasping, the city's hum pressing in from all sides. He rose and checked Emily's door. Closed. He resisted the urge to knock, to peek in, to reassure himself she was still there. Instead, he sat back in the armchair and watched over her from afar. Just as he had promised, just as he would continue to do. No matter how many walls she built, no matter how many times she pushed him away. Because love, real love, wasn't about convenience. It was about showing up, every damn day, even when it hurt, especially then. And Richard Alcott was done running. The following morning, Richard rose before the sun. the city's hum still muted in the early hour. He moved quietly, not wanting to disturb Emily, who finally slept soundly behind her closed door. Over a bitter cup of coffee, he made a list. It was what he knew: planning, strategizing, executing. Business habits he could apply here in this new, uncertain terrain of fatherhood. First, documentation. He would need to secure legal guardianship. Second, education. Emily needed to be enrolled in a proper school. Third, security. No one could find out, not yet. He wasn't ready to share her with the world, especially not with the world he inhabited, ruthless, greedy, prying. He had seen how secrets turned into weapons. He would not let Emily become collateral damage. By mid-morning, Emily shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Richard greeted her with a smile and a plate of pancakes he'd ordered in. He hadn't dared try cooking them himself. "Morning, kiddo," he said lightly. Emily slid into a chair, eyeing him suspiciously. "What's the catch?" Richard chuckled. "No catch, just breakfast." She hesitated, then grabbed a fork. As she ate, he broached the subject carefully. "I was thinking," he said, "maybe we could visit a school today, just to look." Emily froze, fork halfway to her mouth. "No." "Just a visit," Richard said quickly. "No pressure, no signing up." Emily shook her head violently. "I don't need school." "Everyone needs school," Richard said gently. "I learned plenty on the street," she snapped. "Stuff you can't learn from books." Richard's heart twisted. "I don't doubt that," he said. "But there are things that could make life easier for you, safer." Emily stabbed her pancake viciously. "Safe is a lie." Richard opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. She wasn't wrong. For her, safety had always been conditional, temporary, fragile. "Okay," he said finally. "No school today." Emily blinked, surprised. "We'll take it slow," Richard said, "one step at a time." Some of the tension eased from her small shoulders. Progress. While Emily napped that afternoon, still catching up on what must have been months of stolen sleep, Richard made calls. He arranged for private tutors. He contacted a lawyer he trusted implicitly, one of the few, to begin the guardianship process discreetly. He gave strict instructions: no paperwork filed publicly yet, no leaks. But it was already too late. Somewhere, somehow, a whisper slipped through the cracks. It started with a headline: "Billionaire Richard Alcott spotted with mystery child." Paparazzi photos, grainy and distant, but unmistakable. Richard in the diner, Emily huddled across from him. Speculation exploded. Illegitimate daughter, secret adoption, scandal. Richard swore under his breath, crumpling the tabloid in his fist. Emily couldn't see this. She couldn't be dragged into the cruel circus that had destroyed so many. He had to protect her, at any cost. That evening, Emily sensed the shift. She found him pacing the living room, phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice wary. Richard forced a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about," he lied. Emily's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "It's complicated," he said. "Because of me," she said flatly. "No," Richard said quickly. "Because of the world." Emily crossed her arms. "I told you," she said, voice rising. "I don't need saving." "It's not about saving you," Richard said. "It's about keeping you safe." "Same thing." She turned and bolted for the door. Richard moved instinctively, blocking her path. "Emily, please." "You don't get to lock me up," she screamed. "I'm not. You don't even know me." Richard froze, because she was right. He didn't. Not really. He knew her blood, her face, her mother's eyes, But he didn't know her fears, her dreams, her scars, and if he kept pushing, he would lose her. He stepped aside. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "You're right." Emily stared at him, stunned. "You can go," Richard said, "if you want." For a long, breathless moment, she stood there. Then, slowly, her shoulders sagged. "I don't," she whispered. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Richard's heart shattered. "You have here," he said, "as long as you want." She looked at him, something fragile and terrified flickering in her eyes. Then she turned and fled, not out the door, but down the hall, slamming her bedroom door behind her. Richard sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. This was going to be harder than he ever imagined. But he wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. Because for the first time in years, he had something, someone worth fighting for. And Richard Alcott was many things. But a quitter was not one of them. The night stretched long and restless. Richard barely slept. Every creak of the old building, every gust of wind against the windows sent his heart lurching. He half expected to find Emily gone by morning, vanished into the city's endless maze of shadows. But when the first gray light crept into the loft, he heard it, the soft, steady breathing from down the hall. She was still there. Relief flooded him so fiercely it left him weak. He moved quietly, brewing coffee more out of habit than need, and sat at the kitchen counter, waiting. At 8:30, a timid knock sounded at the door. Richard frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He crossed the room and cracked the door open. A woman in a sharp navy suit stood on the threshold, her expression a mask of professional neutrality. "Mr. Alcott?" "Yes." She handed him a thick envelope. "You've been served." Before he could react, she turned and disappeared down the hall. Richard stared at the papers in his hands. A lawsuit, a challenge to his guardianship. Someone, a distant relative of Claire's he barely remembered, was contesting his right to raise Emily, citing concerns about his lifestyle, his fitness as a parent. Richard cursed under his breath. They smelled blood. They wanted Emily. Or more accurately, they wanted whatever settlement they could squeeze from him in exchange for letting her go. He crushed the papers in his fist, rage and fear warring inside him. Not this time. He would fight. He would not lose her. When Emily emerged from her room an hour later, she found Richard sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, the legal papers spread out before him. She hesitated, sensing the tension. "What's wrong?" Richard forced a smile. "Nothing we can't handle," he said. Emily didn't look convinced. She slid into a chair, watching him with wary eyes. "Someone wants to take you away," he said carefully, "but I'm not going to let them." Emily's face closed off instantly, shutters slamming down. "Maybe they should," she muttered. Richard's heart broke a little more. "Emily." "I'm nothing but trouble," she said, voice hard. "Mama said so." Richard reached across the table, but she flinched away. "She didn't mean that," he said gently. "She was scared, tired. People say things they don't mean when they're hurting." Emily stared at him, her chin trembling. "What if I'm too broken?" Richard's throat tightened. "Then we'll be broken together," he said. "And we'll heal together." A single tear slid down Emily's cheek. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached across the table and took his hand. It was a small gesture, but it was everything. The legal battle was ugly. Private investigators pried into Richard's past. Tabloids screamed lurid headlines. Old enemies surfaced, eager to drag him down. Through it all, Richard remained steady. Because every night, Emily was there, doing her homework at the kitchen table, falling asleep during movie marathons, leaving sticky notes on the fridge. Got milk? Little pieces of normalcy that became the foundation of their new life. And slowly, day by day, Emily began to trust him. She started opening up, telling him about the shelters, the nights she slept in subway stations, the friends she lost to the streets. Richard listened, heart-breaking, vowing silently that she would never feel that kind of fear again. Not if he could help it. Not while he still drew breath. The final court date arrived. Richard stood before the judge, Emily's small hand clutching his. He spoke plainly, honestly, about love, about redemption, about second chances. And when the judge ruled in his favor, when the gavel fell and it was over, Richard didn't cheer. He simply knelt and pulled Emily into his arms, holding her as if the world might break apart around them. "You're mine," he whispered. "You're safe." And for the first time, he felt her relax fully against him. No more walls, no more running, just trust and love. That evening, they sat on the rooftop of the loft, watching the sun set over the city. Emily leaned against Richard's side, warm and solid. "You really fought for me," she said quietly. "Always," Richard said. She tilted her head back, looking up at him with those piercing blue eyes. "I'm glad you read the letter," she said. Richard smiled, a real smile, full and free. "Me too, kiddo." The city pulsed around them, loud, chaotic, alive. But in that moment, on that rooftop, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. A father, a daughter. Two broken souls, mended together by love, by choice, by a stubborn, relentless hope. And as the stars blinked into existence overhead, Richard Alcott finally understood. Home wasn't a place. It was a person. And he had finally found his way home. The auditorium hummed with an energy that buzzed in Richard Alcott's veins. He sat quietly near the back, hands folded in his lap, dressed not in the sharp business armor of his past life, but in something softer, a simple navy blazer, open-collar shirt. The man who once ruled boardrooms now looked entirely like any proud father in the crowd. On stage, the graduates lined up, their caps and gowns a sea of blue and gold. Richard's eyes found her instantly. Emily. No longer the thin, frightened child who had thrust a letter into his hands on a rainy street. She stood tall now, radiant with quiet confidence. Her blonde hair was pinned in a loose knot beneath her cap, and her blue eyes, so like Claire's and so much her own, scanned the audience, seeking. Their gazes met, and Emily smiled. A small, private smile meant only for him. Richard's throat tightened. The announcer called names, each one met with polite applause. Richard barely heard them. He was lost in memory. The first year had been the hardest. Emily tested him at every turn, running away for hours at a time, screaming during nightmares so raw they tore through the walls, staring at him with those accusing blue eyes that asked without words, "Where were you? Why did it take you so long?" Richard made mistakes, too strict sometimes, too lenient others, but he never stopped showing up, day after day, night after night, through tantrums and silences and tentative smiles, until one rainy afternoon, 2 years in, she had called him Dad for the first time. He remembered dropping the grocery bag in his hands, too stunned to move. He remembered blinking back tears as she pretended not to notice. After that, things got easier. Not perfect, but real. "Emily Alcott, summa cum laude," the announcer declared. The auditorium erupted in cheers. Richard stood, clapping until his palms stung. Emily crossed the stage, shook hands, accepted her diploma, but instead of walking off like the others, she moved to the podium. The dean adjusted the microphone for her. The room fell into a hush. Richard held his breath. Emily's voice rang clear. 10 years ago, she began, I was a homeless child with no future. A ripple of shock moved through the audience. I believed the world had forgotten me, that I wasn't worth saving. She paused, eyes scanning the crowd until they found Richard again. But someone didn't forget. Her voice trembled, but she pressed on. A man who had every reason to walk away, every excuse to pretend I didn't exist. She smiled. But he didn't. Richard's vision blurred. He fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. He taught me that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose you every single day. A tear slid down her cheek. Today, I stand here because of him. Because he believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. The audience was silent, many openly crying now. This diploma, Emily said, holding it high, belongs as much to him as it does to me. She looked at Richard, her voice breaking into a whisper only he could hear. Thank you, Dad. The room exploded in applause. Richard's hands shook as he clapped, pride and love flooding him so fiercely he thought he might shatter after the ceremony. Amid the crush of students and families, Emily found him. She threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him off balance. He hugged her fiercely, breathing in the scent of her, lavender and rain. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. Emily pulled back, grinning. You're not getting rid of me now, you know. Richard laughed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I'm counting on it. They walked together through the crowded campus, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. So, Richard said casually, what's next for the brilliant Miss Alcott? Emily tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. I was thinking, she said, maybe law school, maybe advocacy work. She glanced up at him, mischievous. Someone's got to fight for all the lost kids out there. Richard felt something in his chest loosen, unfurl. Sounds perfect, he said. They walked in silence for a while, comfortable. Family, home, not a place, a person. And as they stepped into the brilliant, boundless future ahead, Richard knew without a shred of doubt he hadn't just saved Emily. She had saved him, too,